The young and the restless spoilers, a shattered legacy. Nick had always prided himself on being a man of compassion and integrity, a man who could weather the storms of deception and betrayal. For decades, he had carried the belief that Summer, his beloved daughter with Phyllis, was his flesh and blood, a bond forged by love, hope, and the promise of a shared future. Yet beneath the veneer of this cherished relationship, a secret had festered, hidden away like an unspeakable sin. Now, in a moment of unbearable vulnerability, that secret had resurfaced. It began with a quiet, unassuming envelope, one that Nick had received in the dead of night, its contents as damning as they were delicate. The document was a DNA test result, a final, irrefutable piece of evidence confirming what Nick had long suspected in his heart. The test, conducted behind closed doors, had revealed that Summer was not his biological daughter. The revelation struck him like a physical blow, shattering the carefully constructed illusions of his life. As Nick held the paper in his trembling hands, tears streamed down his face. Each drop carried with it the weight of years spent nurturing, loving, and believing in the sanctity of family. The anguish was not merely about the biological connection, it was the betrayal of trust, the painful reminder that the secrets of the past could unravel the very fabric of one's identity. Nick had always believed in the goodness of people, in redemption, and in the possibility of forgiveness. Yet this truth threatened to shatter everything he had ever held dear. For so long, Nick had harbored a quiet suspicion about the paternity of Summer. In the shadowy corners of his mind, doubts had crept in, whispering that something wasn't quite right. Despite his love for Summer, he could never completely silence those nagging uncertainties. And now, with the irrefutable evidence in his grasp, the full force of that doubt crashed over him like a tidal wave. The paper was more than just a piece of test results, it was a verdict that called into question everything he had believed about the woman he once trusted implicitly. Phyllis, Summer's mother and Nick's longtime partner in life's tumultuous journey, had managed to hide this truth for so long that confronting it now felt like reopening wounds that had scarcely begun to heal. Nick's heart ached with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he loved Summer as if she were his own flesh and blood, a daughter born of a union that transcended mere biology. On the other hand, the revelation forced him to ask a question that had haunted him for years: who was Summer, if not his child by blood? The very foundation of his world was crumbling, and the answers were elusive. In the quiet solitude of his study, Nick replayed memories of Summer's childhood. Every smile, every tear, every moment of laughter and pain seemed tainted by the knowledge that their connection was built on deception. How could he reconcile the image of the daughter he had raised with the cold, scientific truth of a DNA test? The irony was as cruel as it was bitter. After all, Nick had always prided himself on his capacity for unconditional love and acceptance, yet now he was forced to confront the possibility that the person he had adored most might have been a stranger all along. The internal battle raged within him. Could he continue to be the benevolent, forgiving man he was known to be, or would this revelation drive him into a spiral of despair? Nick knew that the time had come to confront Phyllis, to demand the truth behind this meticulously guarded secret. But even as the desire for answers burned within him, he hesitated. How could he possibly find the strength to confront Phyllis, knowing that so much time had passed? The truth, long suppressed and buried in the depths of their shared history, now demanded its due. Phyllis, enigmatic and shrouded in her own layers of guilt and regret, had been a master of manipulation. Over the years, she had spun a web of lies, all in the name of protecting a secret that she believed was too dangerous to reveal. But as the years slipped by, the truth became an inescapable specter, haunting every interaction, every conversation. Nick recalled fleeting moments of doubt, the subtle hints that something was amiss. Yet he had always chosen to trust, to believe in the power of love and redemption. Now, that trust was irrevocably broken. In the dim light of his study, Nick contemplated the path ahead. The man known for his generosity and his unwavering commitment to the people he cared about now faced a choice that seemed insurmountable. Could he forgive Phyllis for the betrayal? Could he accept that Summer, the girl who had grown to be the light of his life, was not his biological daughter? The questions piled up like the fragments of a shattered mirror, each reflecting a different aspect of his torment. Nick's thoughts turned to the future, a future now clouded by uncertainty. How would he navigate the complex maze of emotions, memories, and loyalties that this revelation had unleashed? The very idea of continuing as if nothing had changed felt like an act of self-deception. Summer deserved the truth, yet revealing it could destroy the delicate balance of the family he had so carefully nurtured. Would the revelation sever the bond they had built over years of shared joys and sorrows, or could it somehow forge an even stronger connection, transcending the limitations of biology? In the quiet moments that followed, Nick found himself teetering on the edge of despair. The thought of losing Summer, not as a daughter, but as a cherished part of his life, was unbearable. The pain of the betrayal was magnified by the realization that, for Nick, the essence of parenthood was not confined to biology alone. It was defined by love, sacrifice, and the countless moments of shared understanding. Yet, even as these ideals comforted him, the evidence of the DNA test loomed large, a stark reminder of the complexities of truth and the burdens of secrets. As the night wore on, Nick resolved that he would not let this revelation define him. Though his heart ached and his spirit wavered, he knew that he had to confront the past, to seek the truth no matter how painful it might be. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with emotional peril, but it was a journey he had to undertake, not just for himself, but for Summer as well. The legacy of their intertwined lives depended on it. Nick decided that the next step was inevitable, a confrontation with Phyllis. He needed to understand why she had hidden this truth for so long and to grapple with the implications of her choices. The conversation would be one of the most difficult of his life, a moment where past and present collided in a cascade of raw emotion and unfiltered truth. Could he find it within himself to ask the questions that had haunted him for years? Could he forgive the betrayal and rebuild the fragile trust that had once defined their relationship? In the end, Nick's dilemma was not just about DNA or bloodlines, it was about the nature of love, loyalty, and forgiveness. The revelation forced him to confront the painful reality that sometimes, even the purest bonds can be tainted by secrets and lies. It challenged him to redefine what it meant to be a parent, to love unconditionally even when faced with the harshest truths. And in that struggle, he would discover whether the strength of his character was enough to overcome the betrayal and preserve the legacy of the family he so dearly cherished. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over his troubled mind, Nick knew that the journey to healing and understanding was just beginning. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with pain, but it was also a chance for redemption, a chance to reclaim his identity as a compassionate, forgiving father, regardless of biology. In the end, the true measure of a parent was not the genes they shared, but the love they gave unconditionally. And that was a truth Nick vowed to uphold, no matter the cost. In this tale of heartbreak and resilience, Nick's struggle becomes a mirror reflecting the universal challenges of trust, identity, and forgiveness. His journey reminds us that while the truth can be devastating, it also holds the power to transform us, forcing us to confront our deepest fears and, ultimately, to rise above them. The legacy of love, though tested by secrets and betrayal, can endure, shining through even the darkest moments with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The cost of a lie, Phyllis's secret and Nick's pain. Phyllis had always been a master at keeping secrets. A woman of sharp wit and relentless ambition, she knew how to manipulate the game to her advantage, bending truths and sidestepping consequences whenever necessary. But this was different. This wasn't just some fleeting deception or a small lie to protect someone's feelings. This was a buried truth that had the power to devastate lives, to destroy the very foundation of the man she once loved and the daughter she swore to protect at all costs. Nick now knew the truth. And Phyllis? She had known all along. She had known from the moment she held Summer in her arms for the first time. She had known every time Nick looked at their daughter with pride and love, believing her to be his own. She had known when he worried for Summer's future, when he held her close, when he sacrificed everything to be the best father he could be. Phyllis had known, and she had chosen to stay silent. But silence is never truly empty. It's heavy. It lingers. For years, Phyllis had avoided the inevitable, pushing aside any situation that could bring the truth to light. She had gone to great lengths to keep Nick and Summer from becoming too close, subtly interfering when their bond grew too strong. But nothing she did ever changed the fact that Summer adored Nick. No matter how much she tried to create distance, no matter how many obstacles she placed in their way, father and daughter were inseparable. That's what made this revelation so dangerous. Phyllis had always justified her actions to herself. It's for Summer's own good, she would whisper in the quiet corners of her mind. Nick is a good man, and he's been a wonderful father to her. What difference does it make now? But deep down, she knew she wasn't protecting Summer as much as she was protecting herself. Because if Nick had known the truth back then, would he have stayed? Would he have fought for their family? Or would he have walked away, leaving her to pick up the pieces alone? That was a risk Phyllis was never willing to take. And now, she was being forced to face the one thing she had spent years running from, the consequences. Nick's confrontation. When Nick walked into the room, Phyllis knew. She had seen that look before, the raw devastation, the anger that simmered beneath the surface, the heartbreak etched into every crease on his face. But this was different. This wasn't the look of a man who had simply been betrayed. This was the look of a man whose entire world had just come crashing down. Nick was holding the DNA test in his hand, gripping it so tightly that the paper crumpled between his fingers. He didn't need to say anything. The silence spoke for itself. Phyllis took a slow breath, preparing herself for the inevitable. How long? His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness that made Phyllis's stomach tighten. She could have lied. She had been lying for years, after all. She could have come up with an excuse, could have twisted the narrative to lessen the damage. But looking into Nick's eyes now, she knew there was no escape. He already knew. From the beginning, she admitted, her voice steady, almost emotionless. Nick let out a short, bitter laugh, shaking his head. Of course you did, he muttered under his breath. He took a step closer, his blue eyes piercing through her like daggers. And you never thought to tell me? Never once thought that I deserved to know the truth? Phyllis tilted her chin up defiantly. What would it have changed, Nick? You loved her. You raised her. You were there for her every step of the way. Biology doesn't change any of that. Don't give me that crap, he snapped, his voice finally breaking. You didn't keep this from me for Summer's sake. You did it for yourself. For the first time, Phyllis flinched. Because he was right. Nick let out a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair. I need to know, Phyllis. Do you even feel guilty? Do you regret it? A long silence stretched between them. And then, Phyllis did something that made Nick's blood run cold. She smiled. Not a triumphant smile. Not a smirk. But a sad, knowing smile, like a woman who had already made peace with her own sins. I regret a lot of things, Nick, she said softly. But not this. Nick recoiled as if she had slapped him. Jesus, Phyllis, his voice was barely above a whisper. How can you say that? Phyllis sighed, crossing her arms over her chest. Because Summer had a good life. And I would do it all over again if it meant protecting her. Nick shook his head in disbelief. Protecting her? You didn't protect her. You robbed her of the truth. You robbed me of the truth. Do you have any idea what this is doing to me? His voice cracked, his emotions raw and unfiltered. I have spent years loving that girl like she was my own. And now I find out she isn't? How the hell am I supposed to just move on from that? Phyllis softened, but only slightly. You don't move on from it, Nick. You live with it. The silence between them grew heavier. Nick looked down at the crumpled paper in his hand before slowly dropping it to the floor. He had come here expecting answers, but all he had gotten was confirmation of what he already knew. Phyllis didn't regret lying to him. She never had, and she never would. She had made her choice long ago. Now, it was his turn to make one. What comes next? As Nick walked away, Phyllis knew he wasn't walking away from Summer. That was the one silver lining in all of this. No matter how much this hurt him, no matter how much he hated her for lying, Nick would never stop loving Summer. And that was all that mattered. Phyllis had made peace with her sins long ago. She had lied, she had manipulated, and she had stolen the truth from a good man. But at the end of the day, Summer had lived a beautiful life, and Nick had been a part of it. That was enough for her. Because for Phyllis, regret was a luxury she could never afford.